Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Dayton, Chief Product Officer here at Tamr. Thanks for joining us at the Google Cloud Digital Manufacturers Summit. Today, you're going to hear about how Carnival Corporation is using Tamr's data mastering solution to clean and curate parts data across its fleet of more than 100 ships. You'll also learn about having complete, or golden, as we call it, parts records help Carnival from a business perspective. We'll also look at Carnival using Tamr Cloud, which is hosted on Google Cloud. To help tell that story is Doug Frauenberger, Director of Strategic Initiatives at Carnival Corporation. He's leading the effort to master Carnival's parts data. Doug, thanks for being here. Now, to set the scene for folks, Carnival grew by acquiring various other cruise lines. And certainly those acquisitions have been incredibly successful. They've helped Carnival become a leading travel company, but they've also created some data management challenges. So maybe we could start. Doug, could you talk a bit more about that challenge?
I think just speaking to, not just our 9 brands, but also our global reach and our growth through acquisition, just a normal outcome of that is the data silos that really drive through the company. If you think about cruise ships being floating cities with a number of systems and pieces of equipment on board, having each brand sort of own the shipbuilding, new building process and the associated data management, and now making a conscious decision to integrate those through the acquisition has resulted in more parts to track. I think when we started with Tamr, we had 1.5 million spare parts across the fleet. On our vessels, we've got primarily two different, I'll say, shipboard maintenance ERP systems, but we also had 57 instances and different databases of where that data was held. Globally, we never had a standard data format. So to drive consistency of what goes in what field was never our focus. And in some cases in our Italian brands, I think we've seen examples where the data was loaded in Italian. And obviously the data quality varies. I mean, I think without the standard and without a strong central governance process, which we've never had, keeping data quality is challenging.
So we hear this story from companies across many industries that bad data is preventing them from making better business decisions. So the business decides that it needs to improve the quality of their underlying data. Is it fair to say that was the case here at Carnival?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's something that I know the company and our executive team has really been talking about probably for the last 8 or 10 years. As the largest cruise line with only 50% of the market share, the amount of being a company of our size, not having the aligned data really was seen as leaving money on the table for us, right? The ability to really understand our performance of our assets across the fleet and performance of how we're purchasing parts and how that differs globally, price-wise, are opportunities you almost take for granted or you assume are, wow, big company must be really good at that. So that certainly we've made inroads there, and there's examples where we've had successes, but by and large, we saw this really as an opportunity, as a must-have to align the data to really leverage the scale.
Maybe you could share a couple of examples about how having mastered parts data is having a real measurable business impact.
So this is an example where, one of the outputs we've asked from Tamr is to say, great, we've spent this effort, mastering our spare parts. With that mastered data, show me where I'm really spending my money, right? Where can I immediately go? What are the spare parts I should be focusing on to make sure I have contract pricing in place and most favorable pricing in place, because that's where it's been. And I think before we mastered the data, we could run these analyses, but they were never complete because it was only looking at the individual SKUs we had without the mastered view. So once we had mastered data, if you look at on the right, there's effectively 1,100 parts, spare parts that were 40% of our spend, right? So the first thing we did is Tamr gave us a list of those spare parts and said, looking at price and frequency of order, how much am I spending on each one? And the first analysis we did are any of these parts not on contract? And a number were, right? So we were able to go and engage with the vendors, understand the supply base for those parts, and get those items on contract, and immediately drive some procurement savings by getting contract pricing in place. I think the other piece we're able to look at is, are there any ships that have these items in inventory that where from a transaction basis they don't move, where we can potentially redeploy that inventory, and just it's really a one-time savings to avoid having to purchase more. So, just right off the bat, having master data and having that data in Tamr, they were able to help our procurement and sourcing teams just get laser focused on, instead of optimizing the spend of 20 or 30,000 parts, right? Let's focus on where we spend our money. And you can see, right, 1% of parts makes up 39% of the spend. It's a long tail, right, as most businesses would have. So you obviously want to spend your time where the effort's worth it. And that's the example here. I think looking at what this does for our future, and I think I touched upon some of these points earlier, just setting up why we were doing it. But, I think one of our EVPs of technical said, today I get 1 year of data on my component that I maintain on that ship, where potentially I could get 100 years of data if that component was used on all 100 ships and it was mastered. So that's just conceptually, I think, says really understanding our asset performance, what's failing and why, what does it cost us to repair it. And when we build a ship today, we don't have any of that data to drive those specifications. So typically we're negotiating on price, as most companies do when you build a plant or you build a ship. But this will allow us, having good asset data will say, well, maybe we should spend a little bit more upfront because I know the life cycle cost or the total cost of ownership will be lower if we choose this piece of equipment versus the other one. I think just understanding mean time between failure, mean time to repair, and really understanding which assets will benefit from, installing condition-based monitoring, installing, doing a reliability center maintenance study, instead of just saying, well, I'm going to follow the OEM guidelines and potentially over-maintaining our assets. I think, and obviously the last piece, right, having a global database and master data, we recognize we've got to put in central governance and rules to maintain that, but ultimately it should be less administrative work for the organization if you look across our 4 operating groups and 9 brands. I think on the spare parts side, we spoke about how does globalized data let us think about our supply chain more strategically, right? Where today it's very tactical. I think the inventory sharing, we've got probably just shy of $1 billion of technical inventory sitting on our ships. How do we redeploy that? How much of that is potentially slow moving or non-moving where we can use it somewhere else or on another ship instead of buying that part from a vendor? And then obviously the sourcing savings, just having the visibility into what our pricing is, where we can take advantage of global contracts, and being able to provide our strategic partners and our vendors, a global forecast. We think we're going to buy this many parts. We know we're going to need to use this many parts this year on maintenance. So what type of pricing could we drive? Then obviously the last piece is once you align your components and your spare parts, just naturally enables us to align our maintenance, right? So our maintenance jobs, aligning our jobs, aligning and reducing our work content, labor hours for our shipboard crew. One of the things we know we're doing is over maintaining our assets, right? Typically we load the maintenance jobs from the OEM manual. With good data, we can challenge that. Do we need to do all those jobs, or can we do fewer jobs? And then I think the other piece we can't really quantify because we don't have good data is because we're over maintaining, or what are the jobs that are driving maintenance failures, right? So being able to look at statistics that say, this pump always fails a month or 2 weeks after I do this maintenance job. Why is that? Are we causing the failure? Are we doing something wrong, right? So it's just very powerful. Once we have our components mastered, our spare parts mastered, it really just unlocks a lot of opportunities for our business going forward. I think on the globalization and helping us with a more advanced supply chain, that first part, I mean, we are, as an organization, as an industry, right, we're not as advanced as some others. We really look at, when I speak to having $1 billion of inventory on a vessel, a lot of that is purchased during the new build process and installed from the shipyard, right? So, and it's not necessarily done strategically. Well, we recognize that despite our assets moving, a lot of our assets are in the same city, in the same areas, where once we have mastered data, we can certainly unlock inventory sharing opportunities to use our existing parts versus buying new. But I also think that it'll help us look at our inventory holding differently. We've looked at opportunities to say, can we stock fewer parts on our ship and supply our ships more from a central or a number of regional land-based warehouses, which really would do two things. We'd be able to hold less inventory overall as an organization with fewer central or fewer regional warehouses than sort of 100 ships being warehouses. It would also help us really drive lead times down to our vessels. One of the biggest challenges today is when they don't have a part in stock, how quickly can they get it, right? So being able to supply from a regional warehouse or, could really reduce that lead time from the vessel and further drive down what inventory they have to hold on board. And I think if you think about the inventory savings, it's not just the dollars tied up in capital on the ship. Every pound of equipment or you have on a vessel impacts its fuel consumption, impacts how it operates and the cost of us to operate it. So potentially there's further reaching benefits than just being able to right-size our inventory.
So Doug, I know you're using Tamr Cloud, which Tamr hosts on Google Cloud on GCP. Perhaps you could share a bit about why using the cloud makes so much sense for Carnival.
The things we did to speed the time to really getting the model stood up is we worked with Tamr to set up the instance on the cloud, so they're hosting it for us. We have weekly data feeds from our environments going to Tamr that they're picking up and ingesting into their model. And the nice part about that is, as our data changes, as it does every day or week operationally, Tamr is picking up those updates, right? So if new records are added, the model is picking those up and clustering them. If one of the big values of this exercise for us is as we're identifying improvements to our data and we're identifying the golden records, we're going into our legacy systems and updating and improving our current data with that information. So Tamr is able to pick up on that as well. So I really think, each business is different, but for us, being a global organization with data coming from so many sources, having Tamr host it on the cloud, really was the best way to get up and running fastest.
Thank you so much, Doug, for sharing how Carnival is using Tamr and Google Cloud to master data and help the business. It is worth noting that in addition to Tamr Cloud, we also offer a cloud-native deployment of Tamr. Tamr uses machine learning to handle the cleaning and curating of data, a job that's clearly much better suited for the effectively limitless compute power offered by Google Cloud. And for companies migrating to Google Cloud, we help improve data quality as part of making that move. As I like to say, you don't move a dirty house. You clean the house, rationalize your possessions, and then make the move. Tamr helps the world's largest manufacturing companies master their data at scale, allowing them to improve their operations, streamline the supply chain, and drive bottom line hard dollar cost savings. We'd love to work with you and help solve your toughest data challenges. Thanks.